What do you mean it sucks?
This pepper beef is too damn spicy.
What are you talking about? This is good.
How's it going, guys? Pepper Beef too spicy. Hope you guys are doing all right. Welcome back to another episode of Tech Quick Tips, where we talk about concepts in the game which are not big but are gonna help you in the long run. Well, this one could be kind of big, even though I'm probably not gonna spend too much time in. Is the concept that of autopiloting. Autopiloting is a problem that a lot of players have, and generally in the quote-unquote weaker population of players, that is probably one of the biggest weaknesses, is someone's tendency to autopilot. What is autopiloting? It is referring to whether you have very, very set patterns in the way that you play. For example, there is sort of a scenario where you will do one move and you will always follow up with a different move every single time until, I don't know, some people, they change it right away. Some people, it takes them a very long time to change what they do. And why do people develop autopilot tendencies? People tend to develop autopilots because it works for them in the past. So, like, let's say, well, I'm gonna do jab into down back 2, and I always do that because it always worked. That's how I get damage. It's been so effective for me in the past that I'm just gonna do it because, you know, it just seemingly always worked. And it may be a real thing, and it works great. However, what happens when you always do that, where you can't disassociate jab and down back 2? You can't separate the two. You always do them together. So, in this scenario, if an opponent is sharp and aware and smart, they are gonna be like, every time he does jab, he does down back 2. So, in that scenario, if I did jab, he's gonna start blocking it. Because even though, let's say he didn't even see the move coming, he sees it coming mentally because he is aware that you like to do this a lot. You have the tendency, the autopilot, to do that all the time. And it sounds simple to some people. It's like, okay, well, if he's gonna block it, then I'm not gonna do it anymore. It sounds simple to say. However, there is the problem that a lot of people have, is where they can't stop themselves from doing it. Saying it and doing it is two very different things. Because some people are so used to doing it that they literally have a hard time stopping themselves from doing it because they're like, they want to do it, they want to do it, they want to do it. That's how they do things, you know? It's just like what they always do. So, tendency to autopilot and autopiloting in general is very, very dangerous for you as a player. Other examples is like, say, like, well, every time I do like a bunch of jabs, eventually I'm gonna do a low on the 4th down forward one. Or every time that I backdash all the way out here, I'm gonna use warp strike. You know, so every time I back up, you're gonna expect warp strike. Every time I do down forward 1, you're gonna expect down back 3. Every time I do down back 3, I'm gonna do full crouch down forward 2. Every time I do 1, 2, 3 step, I'm gonna do full crouch down forward 2. Every time I slide, I'm gonna do the low. You know, like, all these things, I can't stop them. You know, like, I just do them because, like, well, they got me so much free damage in the past. Why am I gonna stop using them? They seem so great to use. So, how do you stop that? Because all these things become predictable, they are a tendency, they are bad in the long run. They are good if your opponent cannot adapt. If your opponent is very, very low awareness, rigid, and not thinking, then sure, keep doing it. You know, don't fix what's not broken. Keep doing it until they do something about it. The problem comes in is when it stops working and you have to start changing it. This is why death matches in Tekken, which is essentially when you have a rank and the same ranks fighting each other. Sometimes in Tekken 7 it's like one rank 1 or below fighting each other until someone changes ranks. It's important because they have to make a lot of adaptations, because one person really just can't like win 10 matches in a row just doing this and it doesn't get stopped. And if it doesn't get stopped, then the opponent is very, like, you know, either not thinking straight or just not being very aware at all of what's going on in the matchup, like seeing what the opponent's doing in his offense or anything like that, or even defense. Defense are tendencies too. Like, one of the biggest tendencies that a lot of people have is that when they're being pressured, a lot of people don't like to block for that long, so they'll use a panic move. Panic move is mostly referring to a move which has defensive properties. An up forward 3+4, up forward 3 for Noctis is a low crush, and it starts out at 17 frames, so pretty decently fast, but it evades lows. So if opponent's spamming lows a lot, I might use that because I'm afraid of lows. Another panic move from Noctis is his parry, back 1+3, which is also good for raids, but also like, stop attacking me, here's a parry, get off me, you know? Also, back +1+4, which is his punch parry, which is another panic move, which is like another like stop punching me, stop using punch attacks on me, etc. Also his up forward 1, which is a counter hit 14 frame move, which is a decent move, probably the most decent option out of all these. But some people, the thing is that they can't stop themselves from panic optioning. I played a Hwarong player a couple of days ago, or a couple of days ago now, who every time I pressured him, he would do Hwarong's auto sidestep punch move. And I realized that he did that all the time. Like, I would jab him, and he would always, like, on the clock, like, check into work every time, 100% accuracy, do that sidestep punch. And it was catching me a little bit because he was evading my attacks and I got hit. So I said, okay, well, if he's going to do that every single time, then I'm trying baiting it. So the first thing I did was I tried doing home move. Too slow, I got hit out of it. So it's like, okay, well, next time, I'm just going to make that move whiff, because the move works when opponent comes into the move. So I did jab, backdash, he still did the move, and I launched him for it. And after that, he kept doing it, and he kept dying for it. So that was an opponent's tendency to not change his autopilot. I also played an Oscar player not too long ago, and he would always, after I hit him with the low from the slide, he was always afraid of it. Always afraid of it. So every time I did the slide, he started blocking. He just blocked low all the time. Always block low. Never, ever block the mid version of the slide, which results in this. So even though that actually does more damage, that does 39 compared to 37. Where is it? 39 versus 17 plus 20. Yeah, that's 37. So even though this does more damage, he was still so afraid of the low, even though I kept doing the mid to him. Another scenario is after I would do sidestep 2, he would block it, I would sidestep and do down forward 2, because every time he would jab. So these are tendencies, and they are poisonous and cancerous to how you play, because you become predictable, and when you become predictable, opponents can figure out how to beat you more effectively. So, you know, once I figure out that you like doing this, I'm gonna start calculating a way to beat you next time. There's a very good example with a Steve player I played one time. I did Leo's orbital heal. So now we have the autopilot's bad for you. But there is something to be said for using two moves together in a good scenario and turning from autopiloting into conditioning. And conditioning is the good side of autopiloting. What I mean by that is, like, let's say you have a tendency to do 1-2 into down back 2. Or let's say sidestep 2, sidestep down back 2. Sidestep 2? Like that. So you have a tendency to do that, right? If you do that, then opponent, if they're sharp, if they're not sharp, this doesn't matter. But if they are sharp or thinking, they're gonna be like, okay, every time he does that, he's gonna do down back 2. So I gotta start doing that. However, you could start thinking 3 steps ahead of your opponent, because if you do sidestep 2, down back 2, 2 times in a row, 3 times in a row, whatever, no doubt opponent's going to be thinking about it if it's successful like 3 times in a row. If it works out like that, then if you know your opponent is of a thinking variety, then next time you do down sidestep 2, you sidestep and you down forward 2. Or you sidestep and then you do nothing. And then they're like, hey, what happened to the down back 2? And then you go up to them and do an emo man. So you could create an opponent's own autopilot. What I mean by that is you could force them to respond to your supposed autopilot or tendency, and it's not real. Like this, is not a real autopilot, let's say for the sake of example. It's just a way to force you to think about a move. I want you to think about the fact that I'm doing jab, the side step, and the down back 2. I want you to think that I'm doing that every single time. The reason I want you to think about it is because I want you to start ducking. Because once you start ducking, when you expect down back 2, that's when I'm going to launch you. So now you've got the essence of turning a supposed tendency into a mix-up, and the most important part is conditioning, where now you force your opponent to be thinking about the thing that you want them to be thinking about. They're not thinking about...
Round 1. Fight. 1, 2. One, two.
They're not thinking about your mid. They're not thinking about that. They're not thinking about this. They're not thinking about all that. They're thinking about that. They're because you hit them with that so many times. A really good example of this is forward 2, warp strike, into down back 2. This is a pretty good setup with, or rather Okazemi setup with Noctis. It's kind of high risk, but it's good because warp strike puts him at the optimal range for Noctis, where he's about a backdash and a half away. So in this scenario, he could use his long-range moves, and it's kind of hard to react to because you're not point-blank in his face. So at this, the optimal range for down back 2 will hit even if they hold back, to get up and even move like range 3. So in this scenario, it's very easy to use down back 2. However, if I do this like 3 times or whatever, like I just keep doing it, like every time I warp strike you, I just do that. So on the 3rd time, this time, I'm going to do that because I know that you are thinking about that low. It's like, hey, he's used that low so many times. Now it's time for me to finally block it because now I know that he's ready for it and he's going to... I know that he's going to do it. But this time you knew that he's thinking about it. So this time you change it up. You do the mid. You don't even have to do the mid or the opposite move direction. You could just change the move and just do something entirely different. I could do run up, down, forward 1. So changing you're forcing an opponent to think about a tendency and then changing it completely into something else, whether it is just the opposite, which is still good because, you know, down back 2 versus, let's say, a down back 1+2, mid versus low. That's still fine. Or just change it to something else like a throw or a dash up or another kind of mix up down back 1 or a poke or whatever. You know, change how the move, how the flow of your supposed tendency becomes, and never become predictable unless you want them to think that you're predictable. So it's like 2 sides of a coin. The one side that you don't want to be on is where you are unable to adapt to a change in your tendency, where you can't change it, where you will become too flexible, become inflexible, which is bad in all fighting games. But you know, since we're talking about Tekken, it's bad in Tekken too. And that's pretty much what I'm talking about with the concept of conditioning and the dangers of autopiloting. And you know, you don't want to become too used to doing one thing because, you know, just you don't want to get lost in a rut where it's like, I don't know how to, I can't stop myself from responding a certain way because I'm too used to it. So you want to stay flexible. That's kind of the point there. So that was a short one, but I think the concept is pretty important. And if you're having a trouble where you autopilot too much, you find out that an opponent's thinking faster than you, then try putting a little bit more awareness into your game. Start thinking about like how are you doing things and how the opponent is responding to you, and what maybe some of your bad habits or tendencies or when you tend to autopilot, you know. So Autopilot, it definitely is technically called autopiloting because you're doing moves without thinking. Non-autopiloting is you're doing things with intention, whereas like I'm thinking that I'm gonna do more jab and the sidestep and the down back two. I'm thinking that I'm doing that because the next time I'm gonna do this. But the mix-up into the mix-up of itself is whether the opponent knows that you're trying to change your tendency, so maybe they don't ever guess a mix-up. So, like, you know, this is a tendency, but they know that you're eventually going to change it, so you don't change it. So it's a mix-up in itself, but that's where high-level psychology and gameplay comes into. It's whether, you know, you have all these tendencies and then you change them or you don't change them. Or another thing with conditioning is whether you're not conditioning or autopiloting at all, you're just playing things very, very read-based, where you are just like, you know, not taking many chances and just playing a very straight, just, you know, with punishing and very, 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 you know, non-setup heavy and very, very, like, basic Tekken, where you just respond to whiffs and you force whiffs and so such and so forth, and changing what you do every often. If you play a style where you change what you do all the time, that's not really conditioning or autopiloting, but that's good. It can be good for you, and I don't really see too many negatives of changing always what you do. It just depends on whether what you do is working or not, because it's two philosophies of whether you want to keep doing what you're doing because it's working and you don't want to stop it, or you just want to keep your opponent on your toes and always change what you're doing. It's a risky thing because obviously if you start doing something new and it's not working out, then well, you are just wasted time and maybe you lost some rounds or maybe even lost a game. So it's whether a concept whether don't fix, don't broke. If it's not fixed, don't broke. I mean, if it's not broken, don't fix it, or you just always keep your opponent on your toes. Depends on whether what you're changing it to is also going to be effective. And if you are doing the same thing over and over again, you want to be sure that your opponent is thinking about it or is not thinking about it. If they're not thinking about it, keep doing it. They're probably going to correct. If you're doing it so much that you think that, all right, it's probably about time that they're thinking about it, that's when you need to start changing it up and doing something else. So thanks for watching, and I will keep you on the next one. See you on the next one. Check out Arcade Impact, and I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.